Hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of the Kristen Supercrypt Left Back Ringside Report Show. My guest today is Natalie Cline, who is another Democratic candidate running for Congress. She's running in West Virginia's District 1. Before I get into our interview, I wanted to explain we did have some technical difficulties during our video. I don't have a professional studio, as you can see. This is our home from our Star Wars Legos behind us. So our technology is kind of, bare minimum. But I've only been doing this show for a little over a month, so I plan to, build up on better technology and so forth. And I'm not even sure whether the issues that Natalie and I had were due to internet connectivity or the computer that I use or what. But we had some sound issues where the meeting started off really smoothly, but then kind of got choppy, the audio. And towards the end of it, I had to cut it off because I could no longer hear Natalie talking. However, we did get over a half an hour of great material. And Natalie is absolutely delightful, but she's also been really patient with me. So I just wanted to make sure that my viewers knew that we already had to reschedule this once due to technical difficulties. And she also talks about in her area broadband being a big issue, which you'll see in the video. But she was born and raised in West Virginia, and she is intimately familiar with her district's strengths and challenges. And she boasts about the hardworking, giving nature of the constituents of District 1 of West Virginia. And she says it's just not getting the kind of compensation, opportunities, and benefits that they deserve for it. So thanks for joining me today. Thanks for your patience with our technical difficulties, and please enjoy the interview. Welcome back to the Kristen Supercrypt Maleftek Ringside Report Show. We're here with Natalie Cline, who is running in West Virginia's 1st District. Welcome, Natalie, and thanks for being on my show today.
Thanks for having me.
So, Natalie, you were born the same year as me, 1981, go class of 1999,
That's right.
in Parkersburg, West Virginia. Can you tell us a bit more about your hometown and describe for us, and for outsiders like myself, what is special and unique about your district and the people who live there?
Yeah, so I was born in Parkersburg, which is a small city right beside my hometown of Williamstown, West Virginia. When I was growing up in Williamstown, I think our population was about 2,500. So it was a very tiny little town. At the time, I think we had one stoplight. I think they have 3 now. But it was great. It was great growing up here in the 80s in a small town like that as a kid. You got to have that very, very kind of stereotypical childhood of the 80s, out riding your bike around town, and your parents didn't need to necessarily know where you were, and you would meet your friends at the park and get into kid trouble, and stuff like that. And we have a couple other cities in our district, Wheeling, West Virginia, which is where I live now. It's in the northern panhandle, little sliver of our state between Ohio and Pennsylvania. So I'm right outside of Pittsburgh. And we also have like this corridor from Clarksburg, Fairmont, and Morgantown. Morgantown is where West Virginia University is. So I've lived in most of these at some point in my life. And then my husband and I lived in DC for a while. Yeah. I attended WV-1, and my husband's from Wheeling. So, we've moved around a lot. But we did live in DC for a while, and we were there when our son was born. But when he was 2, we decided we wanted to come back because we wanted him to have that kind of same childhood that we had here, growing up in the 80s, where you have that close-knit community and it really feels like a small town. And I was just kind of shocked. At first, we were only gone for about 5 years. And the opioid epidemic was a thing when we left, but it had really started to ravage just about all of our communities by the time we had come back.
Mm.
And I just keep looking at my son's cohort and seeing how, they're really being robbed of their childhoods because they're kind of victims of this epidemic. So that's what made me decide to run for office.
That's amazing. That's an awesome reason to step up. And speaking of Parkersburg, I knew there was a reason it sounded familiar when I first was, doing my research on you.
Right.
And it was actually my husband that was like, that's the town that that movie was about, Dark Waters. Which for those that are watching this that maybe haven't seen that movie, it has to do with DuPont, chemical company, and it poisoning the water in Parkersburg, and it had a really big impact. There was a big lawsuit about it. Can you tell us a little bit like how that impacted your community? I'm sure that had to have like an impact just on general trust of the people of Parkersburg
Yeah,
through
it
some.
definitely has. So when I was growing up, DuPont was huge, as were a lot of other plants along the river. We're right on the Ohio River. So I grew up from, my back window out of my house, I could look down over onto the river. And that river is dotted with these types of plants, going all the way up into the panhandle. So many of them, not, I don't know that I can say all of them, but many of them have had issues with environmental pollution over the years. And I know that when I was growing up as a kid, if, your parent had a job at DuPont, you were set. That was something that people would aspire to. If you had a job there, you knew that you were going to have a good family wage pay and you were going to have good benefits and job security. You weren't going to have to worry about where you were going to be in 5 years. You'd
Mhm.
be able to afford your nice house and cars. Your spouse may or may not be working, just depending on what your position is and how many children you had.
Right.
There were also some other plants along there as well. Both of my grandfathers worked at a plant called American Cyanamid. It's no longer the same name. Another company has it now, but it was a lot of the same thing. Like if you had a job at American Cyanamid, you were set. My grandfathers were union members. One of my grandmothers never worked a day in her life, and they raised 4 kids. But it was that type of thing where you knew you were going to get a good wage. You knew you were going to have great benefits, and you didn't have to worry. You could stay there and raise your family and live the American dream.
Right.
And what people didn't realize was that some of these facilities were slowly poisoning us. And it sounds so radical to say something like that, but if you've watched Dark Waters, you understand exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It was literally happening. And I know when I was growing up, I swam in that river. I can't tell you how many times. That was the thing to do. It's a great river for recreational activities. I mean, all my friends' parents, they all had boats. We didn't have a boat. We didn't have boat money. But my friends' parents, they had boats, and we would go out and jet ski and water ski and inner tubing and swim in the river. And you'd run into other friends with their parents on their boats, and it was fun. Um, you know, and we didn't know. We didn't know what it was doing to us. There are rope swings in my little town, when we were teenagers, we would walk to and get in trouble and, jump into the river. And it was causing great health effects. I myself have thyroid issues. I have a lot of friends who have told me the same thing, that they have thyroid issues. And it's one of those things you wonder, is it a result of swimming in that river every summer?
So many weird things that have branched off from. Yeah, I mean, I'm in Michigan, so the Flint water crisis and all the different conditions that they're finding a
Yeah.
connection to the lead that was in the water in Flint. And It's just surprising. You would think that, it'd be isolated to a few different types of side effects of that exposure, but there's so many.
So many cancers. I mean, everybody has a relative who either has cancer or is dying of cancer or who has died of cancer, in these communities. And you didn't necessarily have to be, swimming in the river like I was. Working in the plant was hazardous.
Mhm.
There were so many reasons that our health was being put at risk. It was in our groundwater. It was everywhere. And it's going to take a long time to clean that up. And I think they had the statistic even in the movie that it's like 99.7% of the world's population has C8 in their systems. And C8 is what is used to make Teflon. Then that came, that was one of the things that was produced at DuPont.
Carbon change, yeah.
Yeah, and the effects are they're just unimaginable, but we are living those types of effects every day, and we have to figure out how to cope with those. They affect our families, they affect our employment, they affect our health, they affect our checkbooks because, we have to figure out a way to pay these bills or to survive without working if we end up on disability or medical leave because we
Mhm.
can't work as a result of this. And it's just one of those things that we can never fully be compensated for or recover from.
I'm sure this experience and you being in it and part of it has also influenced like how you would make policy decisions and so forth, with the consideration of those sorts of things for the people in your district.
Yeah, so it's kind of twofold for me. When you have strong labor unions, you're able to advocate collectively for better conditions and better regulations, equal pay, fair treatment. And also at the same time, when we are demanding that our corporations are held accountable by our legislation, it's a win-win for everybody. And in West Virginia, we've had situations like this, what we're seeing, and that is a result of DuPont. And we also see what has happened from our coal mine industry in the state. I
Mhm.
mean, we identify with coal mining. It is a part of our identity in a way that is difficult to really explain to an outsider. People don't understand that this is part of us because everybody either had their daddy or their granddaddy or an uncle or a brother who worked in the mines. And for people to just hear a politician talking at them and telling them, oh, we're going to re-educate you or we're going to, do something else. It's like, but that's my identity. That's all I've ever known. And we're proud of that because we, as a result of our coal mines in West Virginia back in the early 1900s, I mean, we fought a literal tiny war over this, which won our right to unionize and helped set the precedent for the very first unions in this country. So we're very proud of this history. But it's become very obvious that it's just not going to come back like it was. You can buy energy cheaper. And in my opinion, we need to have legislators who are coming in and saying, you know what, we need to start rewarding these regions who have provided electricity for our nation historically and have suffered all of the health effects of COPD, chronic bronchitis, black lung, disability, these types of things as a result. And let's reward them with good family wage paying jobs that aren't going to require them to go tens of thousands of dollars into student loan debt at age 45 to learn some new academic field.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of industries, energy producing industries, that we can incentivize to come here. But in my opinion, the only way we do it is if we tell them that they have to hire at least 80% of their workforces from those locales. And they have to be held to ethical standards, that they cannot further contribute to environmental pollution or, groundwater pollution, so that we can stop suffering the side effects that come with a lot of these jobs.
I love that. I actually had a question specifically because I saw that policy proposal and it really stood out to me about the energy, the
Reestablish our Energy Authority Act.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. It was
Yeah.
way later down the line. This happens all the time in my interviews. We get to talking, and then like 3 of my questions that were later on in the interview end up getting knocked out early in the interview. But are there any more specific language that policy proposal that you have that you'd like to share now, since we're already talking about it?
Yeah. So I kind of touched on this in the beginning of my very long answer to your previous question, when I was talking about labor unions and how it is important to have labor unions to collectively be able to advocate for fairness across the board. And that's something else that I want to fight for. And I realize that that is somewhat difficult when you have some states who have right to work legislation, and West Virginia is one of those states that has right to work legislation. So that makes it difficult. But I feel like that is an additional issue. I don't know that it would necessarily go into that kind of a policy proposal, but it is an additional issue that I want to fight for in Washington, to make sure that we are strengthening our labor unions instead of further weakening them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that I think as a West Virginian, any West Virginian should be able to get behind. I mean, we built labor unions for this country, and we know how necessary they are to make sure that we have safe workplaces, safe mines, OSHA. We have the ability to have workers' compensation. We have the ability to fight for proper benefits. And we need to make sure that our government is helping us to be able to strengthen that instead of further tearing it down. But I think it has to be a separate issue. We can't tie it into that.
Very good. And you are a computational linguist? I took a class in linguistics in college, and it was one of my favorite classes, but I had never heard of a computational linguist. What is that exactly?
Well, prepare to be bored. I'll try to make it as short of an answer and as least boring as possible. So yeah, if you've taken linguistics, you're studying language, and one of my master's degrees is in linguistics. And then I kind of fell into this job at a software company when we were living in DC. And basically, as a computational linguist, what I'm doing is helping to program language into technology. So the technology that we work on is natural language processing. So we work on software that is able to understand our language and do something as a result of that. So like a lot of our customers are law enforcement or government agencies, and they might have servers full of data coming in. And analysts today can't keep up with reading it fast enough, as easy as it is to get that data. So our software is able to identify whatever it is that they're looking for. If they're looking for certain phrases or words, or events or combinations of things, we can understand it and also understand how things are connected, and then automatically send it to somebody to further analyze. So it's been cool.
Yeah, very cool. Okay. From what I've observed, being a mother has an impact on a person's views and values. So you have a son, Teddy. Can you tell us a little bit about your son, and how would you say he's influenced your vision for children and for families in your community?
Teddy is 5.
Okay.
And Teddy he's going to rule the world, I swear. He has a very strong little personality. He's very sweet, but he is very opinionated, and he knows immediately what he thinks. And
Wonder where he gets that from.
I don't know. I have no idea. But he's fun. He's really fun. He keeps us on our toes. in good ways. And it's inspiring to be able to like look at your 5-year-old and kind of be taken aback and, realize like, the analytical thought that's going on in his head. And then he'll say something so innocent as a result, and say, well, like, but why are they being mean? Or why can't I do this anymore? And stuff like that. And you want to give them that very blunt answer, well, because our government has failed you, or something like that. But, you try not to. But it has really opened my eyes as to all of the areas that are lacking in our legislation for our families. And I didn't realize before how many other countries have set up options and precautions to protect our families and to help our families thrive. Childcare. Childcare is it can be legislated. I mean, we can help pay for this. And I don't care what label somebody wants to throw at it, if they want to call it socialist or not socialist. I don't care, but we all need it. If you have ever had a child, at some point you have needed childcare and you have been in a situation then where you were desperate. And it's just basic need for our families. And if we can, pay for public education, which we're not paying nearly enough for, by the way, we can certainly be providing for our families for childcare. And I think people would be pleasantly surprised to see the result of, better economic prosperity for our families, for women in the workforce. And it just makes all of us more successful when we're taking care of each other.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's funny because you hear the word family values and you tend to link it to more of the conservative side of politics because it's always emphasized on the conservative side of politics.
Yeah.
But it's funny because there are so many democratic policies and initiatives and so forth that actually support family values and family stability and the family staying together and all of those sorts of things. So that's why I kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about it because you're a Democratic candidate and every Democratic candidate that I've talked to has very strong family values.
I feel like because so much has changed, I just remember when I was growing up, and it was in the 80s. And at that time, my mom was putting herself through college and working full time. And my dad was working full time. And I would be at my grandma's house every single day. She never worked a day in her life. My grandfather was a union member. And it was because of that union that ensured that he had fair pay and, family wage. And that's the thing, family wage paying jobs, not minimum wage. We need to get back to family wage and stop fighting about freaking minimum wage. Right. And take care of ourselves. And, how many people can afford to have a spouse who's not working nowadays? And when you look at a place like West Virginia, you'll see that we have a lot of families where, both partners are working multiple jobs to make ends meet, or they get screwed over because their employer will not have them on payroll enough hours in order to pay them benefits. So they have to go and get another supplemental job so they can pay their medical bills or their kids' school lunch, or whatever it is. And it's because we have allowed our corporations to have so many benefits and be able to do this to us that we are left struggling. And then when you have to work, multiple jobs and shifts like that, who's watching our kids? So we need to start refocusing on our families. And that means making sure that we have childcare, making sure that we have legislation in place for equal pay, making sure we have legislation in place for health benefits. Mm-hmm. Whether a company can't work you 32 hours a week and get away with not paying you health benefits, or whether it's coming from universal health care in this country. But every time a country ticks those boxes and meets those needs, They have a prosperous economy, high quality of health, and a high quality of life.
Mhm.
And I'm sick and tired of seeing us going down a sliding scale backwards
Yeah.
while we have people who are about to become trillionaires in this
Yeah,
country.
exactly. And one of the issues that you've mentioned on your campaign website as well, that kind of stood out to me is the opioid crisis in your district.
Yeah.
Can you give a little background on how that became a problem and what you hope to do to help tackle it a little bit, if you're elected?
Sure. So this is one of the main reasons I decided to run. I mean, it was just like hitting me in the face when we came back. It was just so drastic. And I mean, it was here beforehand. Um, you you cannot live in this district and not either be affected by it yourself or have a relative who is affected by it somehow. We have a population of about 1.8 million people. It's not a large state.
Right.
But of that 1.8 million people, we have over 7,000 children in foster care, and 11% of our kids now live with what we have now coined as grand families. We've actually had to coin that as a term. And they are really the ones who are the biggest victims in all of this because they don't get to have a childhood anymore. The pharmaceutical companies, I mean, as basic as you want to say it, targeted us. You look at a state that has economic depression, job loss, is losing their manufacturing industries, losing their labor, and their targets for addiction. They're targets for, a proud worker to go into his position and say, I'm not going to be my Christmas presents. I'm not going to be able to put food on my table. And they're going through depression. And their physician writes them a prescription, and that guy can then choose to take it and potentially become an addict or sell it and put food on the table. And it's these little types of things that start to become cyclical in our society, and it has snowballed so much. And I mean, you can see the Washington Post, New York Times articles that have been written about it, and some of these physicians and the thousands and thousands of pills that they were prescribing to some patients and into some towns that had populations of a few hundred people. And we're not doing anything about it. Our politicians are taking campaign donations from the pharmaceutical industry. My opponent does. Our politicians are fighting every day to make sure our corporations get better tax incentives and benefits, and no one's fighting for our people. The last 6 months in this district, we've had 4 of our medical facilities close. One of them was the only hospital in the entire county of Marion County, and they were all owned by the same company that bought them cheap, stripped them for profits, and went on their way. And when that last one in Fairmont closed, in Marion County closed, it closed the day COVID hit West Virginia because COVID's not profitable. That's not their fault that we have an opioid crisis, but it's this type of behavior that we allow corporations to have with no accountability. And that also includes our pharmaceutical industries and politicians who are not advocating for our best interests to make sure that our health and welfare is taken care of.
And you also stated under your Gen Z policy initiative on your site that 45 people leave West Virginia to move to another state per day. And in a state with such a small population to begin with, that's quite a lot. What is the Gen Z policy initiative and how would it remedy this issue?
Yeah, so I'm a woman who works in STEM, and not enough. Number one, there aren't enough women working in a STEM field, so I want to do something about that. But also, working in STEM and being somebody who spent a lot of time going to college, and now that I work in STEM and realize I didn't need to go into that amount of student loan debt to get into the job that I ended up in. And I'm going to be paying on that for another 7 or 8 years, and instead I could be saving for my own child's future. So when you realize that there are so many profitable industries that do not require you to go into this kind of debt, it makes you want to do something about it for the next generation. And in my opinion, the next generation in West Virginia is the one that we need to be investing in the most. It's the one that we need to be making sure do not become further victims of the opioid epidemic. And it's the one that we need to make sure that are going to have jobs that don't require them to go 60 and 80,000 into student loan debt. So the Gen Z initiative would allow high school students and recent high school graduates to take free virtual courses in a variety of STEM fields. This can be anything from programming to other IT industries, cybersecurity, vertical farming, alternative energy principles, things like this that are all possible. And when we're able to provide,
and forward thinking areas.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
if we can help.
Sorry, I keep talking at the same time as you. I was just going to say, I've been hearing from many candidates that are running, Democratic candidates that are running in rural areas or red states, that this is a very important issue to them too, because of the incredible, inconvenience, if you can minimize it to an inconvenience that our children have to deal with today. We just didn't have the same opportunities that our parents had with factory jobs and so forth. So we need to be
exactly. I mean, I'm looking at this. Yeah, I'm looking at this as a victim of the student loan crisis. I myself have a ridiculous amount of student loan debt that I'll be paying on for a long time. My generation's a victim of, or our generation's a victim of that. The generation after us is a victim of that. And it further impedes our ability to get a mortgage, buy new cars, invest in our children's future. And I think for a lot of us now, as we are now at this age where we are politically active and we want to be the change makers, we recognize that this is not something we want for our kids. And we want to get back to some of those principles that our parents' generation was blessed with, being able to have a family wage paying job and good benefits and be a member of a union, or be able to actually afford college credits that don't cost $1,000 a credit. It's ridiculous. But not everything has to require a college degree. And while our public schools have a curriculum that they are required to teach, and we have our electives in those public schools for our kids to take advantage of, if we have kids who are especially interested in some of these fields, then I think we have a responsibility to offer some free courses to them so they can be better prepared and maybe test out of some of those college courses, or already be prepared to jump into a workforce right out of high school. And when they stay here, then they contribute to our economy. They become the next generation of entrepreneurs for us and provide a better future, not only for them, but also help to take care of us.
Makes perfect sense. And you, this one was about the coal mining, about the Energy Authority Act. So I'm going to go ahead and skip that one since we kind of covered it. If you could narrow it down to one policy issue, what has the COVID-19 pandemic taught you about what needs to change in your district in order for it to be successful?
Broadband.
Yeah.
We were already a state that didn't have broadband coverage. I mean, the majority of my district has broadband connectivity issues. And we have our own broadband policy proposal. We're working with another candidate on the ballot to, come up with an even better one. Because in my opinion, it's time for our federal government to champion this as a utility, just as the federal government did with the National Electrical Code. It's time we have a national broadband code where the government is making sure that we have those last mile connectivities, but they're also ensuring that no one company can monopolize it. But one of the things that I will fight for with this is to make sure that there's grant money in there to help offset the cost of a broadband connection for households who have kids in public schools. Broadband's expensive. It's expensive for every single one of us. I think last week my husband hit the roof when our trial period or introductory contract or whatever that we had expired, and all of a sudden our bill went to $160 a month. He was calling and saying, cut this, cut that, get rid of it, and get me a basic package for $120 a month, which is ridiculous. Right. So we need to make sure that if we are giving people broadband, and we're going to then further expect our kids to be able to use it to participate in school, we need to make sure that they can afford to do so.
That makes good sense too. And yeah, that's another one that I've been hearing frequently in regards to the pandemic and what needs to change. And it's kind of crazy that we're the richest, supposedly the richest country in the world, and that we have so many large areas throughout this country that don't have access to something as basic as broadband. So,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
who are you running against, and what are the most prominent differences between you and your opponent?
I am running against a 5-term Republican incumbent, David McKinley, who, traditionally lays low until about this time before an election, and you'll see a bunch of splashy commercials on TV, but otherwise people generally feel ignored. To the point that after I decided to run, people, vent and complain to me, but, his office gave me a form letter as a response, or they won't even talk to me, or they don't host real town halls. They do teletown halls. And I know that that voice is his, campaign manager or intern, and they're planting the questions. And this is what I hear. And it gets so bad that people are like complaining to me, like I can do something about it. And I have to say, well, if you vote for me, I will. We were hosting town halls across all 20 counties before COVID hit. And that's something he hadn't done in 10 years. But, you get into such polarizing politics in a state like this that is depressed, and the GOP is very good at marketing, and then they can come in and make you scared to vote for somebody else. But West Virginia had always been Democratic. Historically, we have been Democratic. It's only been 20 years that we've moved red. So I don't think that we're a true red. And I feel like every time we, as a population, come about and say enough, we see a major change. We did that when we seceded from Virginia for civil rights. We just left that state on principle. We did that at the Battle of Blair Mountain when we fought a literal war for our right to unionize for our coal miners. A couple years ago, this entire nation saw our teachers inspire them to strike for fair pay and fair benefits. So I feel like that change is brewing again in West Virginia, and people are going to say I can't get down any lower. At a certain point, you can't make my paycheck any less. You can't take away any more benefits because they're all gone. I can't work a fourth job, and nothing else is working. You know what? It's time for a change. We're done. And I feel like that's occurring here. Hopefully we'll see a large change across the board with a lot of our politicians and a lot of our offices. But the guy I'm running against favors corporations every single day of the week, and will, have a couple bills that favor people every once in a while so he can brag about them for a long, long time. But meanwhile, he doesn't care about us. He's independently wealthy. He takes 98% of campaign donations from corporate PACs. And that means he doesn't even have to campaign and interact with people. He just wakes up and it gets deposited in his account. And then he will most likely vote favorably for those corporations when legislation hits his desk. And that's why you're seeing a lot of candidates like myself who are refusing corporate PAC money. Because when I get there, I'm going to vote my conscience, and I'm going to vote for what's in the best interest of the people of my district. Corporations are fine. They're going to be fine.
Right.
And they can afford to pay a little more.
Right. And when we started off this interview, we were talking about corporate, involvement and what that can do to, muddy the waters and make it, no pun intended, actually, when I said that, but,
Yeah.
it's amazing to me that it's a legal process for people to even be able to accept corporate donations like that.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask, what the shift was that made West Virginia originally more Democratic and become more Republican, your district. I think you talked a little bit about that, but was there a pivotal event or moment or anything that kind of made your district shift in that direction?
Yeah, so I think 20 years ago or so, we saw the GOP get very good at messaging and marketing. And I say that with my linguistic background, education and experience in mind, where I have seen the polls where you will take a GOP message with GOP wording and then rephrase it with Democratic wording, and the end result for both options is the same, but every single time somebody chooses the GOP option, even though it's the same thing. And as a linguist, part of my job as a computational linguist with the company where I work is we have what we call sentiment scores on words. And you have these fun little algorithms. So if you have different combinations of these words with these scores, you can get a quantitative analysis or a score on a document or a text message or an email that you can look at that score and you know that the author of that text, their intent was to incite, or their intent was to persuade, or their intent was to just present news and have a very neutral tone. You know, all of these different things. And we see the Republican Party who really understands this and is able to tap into those emotions and reactive type of words in their messaging. And when you have a population that is losing their industry and is losing their identity, and your legislators are not bringing additional jobs in for you to work, and you're watching your kids move away because they can't get a job, and all of a sudden somebody's presenting you with a very targeted message, you grab onto that because that makes you feel better. And it makes you feel that when you go and cast your vote, that it's actually going to make a difference, even though it might be for the wrong party. But it's one of these things that I've been railing about the Democratic Party for so long. And if, you know, if they listen to this and get mad, I don't care. They should be doing better. But we need to understand this as well and combat it. And we need to talk to people like real people, have conversations, and, you know, stop talking at them. And I feel like that's been a big mistake of the Democratic Party in regions like ours.
Yeah, and I was just watching a documentary last night, The Brainwashing of My Dad, it's called. And that was a lot of what it was about, is how it plays on people's emotions and anger and the divisiveness and just getting people to point their fingers for the problems at someone else rather than recognizing that the problem is that the people that are leading are not coming up with any solutions for them. And so, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And finally, I like to always end by asking if you could use this opportunity. I don't know how often you get a chance to, you know, do interviews like this or just talk openly with your district, the people in your district. But if there was anything that you want to tell them about you, about why you are the best candidate, and how you're going to represent them better than anyone else could, what would you tell them?
I have nothing to lose. I'm not a career politician. I never wanted to be. I still don't want to be. So yeah, I have nothing to lose. And I feel like as a person, I'm always going to trust the one who actually is sticking their neck out there more than the one who's profiting off of the job. I have a job. I don't need another one. But this is something that I feel passionately about because I cannot help them and make sure that they are better off than their parents' generation. And I think that that's something every parent and grandparent can consider in their futures to be better than ours. And right now we have a real problem where that's not necessarily going to happen if we don't do something to change. The administration who is home campaigning instead of a global pandemic, you need to go vote every one of them out. If they're not, you know, yelling and screaming that they should be in Washington, vote them out. We need to hire people who are taking care of us. And if you're not being taken care of, fire them. I think the sound may have gone away. I think you might be muted.
She's the speaker. Your voice was, you know, muddled again. So I accidentally must have hit the mute button when I was trying to make it better. But what I was saying was, if you don't mind, because it was way all the way up until you were answering that last question, and then it got really garbled and was doing what it did the last time for some reason. I can actually just end this call right back, and then we ask that last question, if you're all right with that. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for bearing with me. I'm trying to make sure that we can make this work this time. So I'm going to go ahead and end. I'm going to restart my computer, and then I'll send the Zoom link.
Okay.
Okay, great.